Welcome. I was supposed to be spending the next hour and 15 minutes talking, teaching, explaining some aspects of the craziness of trying to understand what is known in the Jewish world as gematria. Gematria is a very crazy system by which letters and numbers in the Hebrew language and in Jewish thinking can be intertwined, mixed up, reversed in their order. Words can be intentionally misspelled. Misinformation and misinterpretation can be part of the entire scheme. And I was going to use that as an introduction to a relatively unknown aspect of some Jewish thinking, because the context of this Thursday afternoon class is what we call, I've never learned that in Sunday school. So these are things that, when we were younger, when we were being introduced to a more elementary explanation of Jewish thinking, Jewish stories, Jewish law, Jewish practice, all those kinds of things, they didn't necessarily teach them to us when we were younger. But now that we're a few years older, we might be able to relate to them with a little more maturity and experience. That's the context of the class. And that's what I was prepared to do until last Saturday morning. Not only because of questions that people have been sending to me and the obvious amount of interest, of concern, I guess we could do a whole gematria range of emotions, running from grief and mourning to rage to disappointment to confusion, and on and on and on and on and on. So what I decided to do was to spend some time today. This is not a lecture. It is not a lecture. This is as much an opportunity for you to either ask questions, that's you, people here in the building, people at home, for you to ask questions, or for me to try to clarify some things, to give some context that people may not be that familiar with. And most importantly, for us as a community and as extended friends, just to be able to share, be with each other in these extremely difficult moments. On Saturday morning also, and you're invited to come back if you would like, we have a Saturday morning service at 10 o'clock. And then after the service, we'll also have some additional readings, prayers, maybe we sing a few songs for peace, and have that kind of a moment of solidarity. I'll give you a little bit of what they call in Yiddish, a little bit of a Vorspeise, a little bit of a taste in advance. Everyone knows that we just celebrated Simchat Torah, so we started reading the Torah all over again. We're not going to read the story of creation this Saturday morning. You know the story of creation. Actually, there's more than one, but that's a different conversation, a different lecture or lesson. But what is still in the Torah portion, appropriately, is the story of Cain and Abel. Okay, so we're going to put Cain and Abel into a context of what we're all experiencing right now. Okay, So let me give some background, some context, and again, and then encourage questions, comments. Let's try not to be speeches necessarily, but if there are things that I can clarify for you. We all have very, very strong emotions about what is going on. We are all suffering. We are grieving, and we are angry. As I said, we could probably give a whole alphabetical list of all the emotions that we have been experiencing since we woke up on Saturday morning, and that continue and get stronger and stronger and more bewildered and confused. Something I said last? Or
Nope.
All right. So context. In the Holy Land, in the Promised Land, there are Zionists. There are people who feel that the Jews should not control the Holy Land. And within each of those two major groups of people, there are smaller groups of people, most of whom don't agree. There are the ones who think that the rabbis and the pious and the devoted, and to the phrase that we kind of use today is the black hats, the ultra-Orthodox, that they should be determining what kind of state, country Israel should be. On the far, that's at one end of the spectrum in the Jewish world. On the other end of the world, there are the secularists and those who think that the Jewish state, if you will, should be similar to all the other nations of the world. And just coincidentally, that's where Jews feel free and comfortable to live, because we're close to our history, the Holy Land, the holy places, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as has always been the case in our tradition since the days of Abraham and Sarah, we interact with other peoples in that Holy Land. They've had many, many, many different names throughout history, going back to the Canaanites and the Ammonites and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Ammonites, and we could go on and on and on and on and on. And with some we lived fairly peacefully, with most we did not. And we got to a point in our history, a fairly recent history actually, where all of these various groups and all of their strong motivations to make of the Holy Land what they thought was the best way that God wanted that land to be inhabited and to serve as a free land, if you will. And we got to the point where what the rabbis called sinat chinam, senseless or baseless hatred. In the Jewish community especially, but it was happening amongst the other nations and the other denominations just as well. This sinat chinam, this senseless and baseless hatred, was causing such a rift amongst the Jewish community that the strong nations, the powerful nations from outside who wanted to take over and kick all the Jews out, if not even kill all the Jews, could come along and step into the vacuum because the Jews were disagreeing with each other. I'm not talking about 2023. I'm talking about 2,000 years ago. And according to Jewish tradition and legend, that's why the temple was destroyed. The second temple was because the Jews especially, but realize this is also happening at the same time as the Christian world is developing, okay, as a branch off from Judaism. And not all of the early Christians, or better pronunciation would be the early Christians, not all of them agreed on the best way to, do we stay within the Jewish community? Do we leave the Jewish community? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's 2,000 years ago, but there are those who would look and say history is repeating itself. And if we today, the Jews of today, can't realize that we are reliving the same kind of historical issue as our ancestors led 2,000 years ago, and if not even 500 years before that, the destruction of the first temple, when all the advisors said to the Jewish kings, you better get your act together and don't be such an autocrat. Don't try to change all the religious and the politic and the judicial laws of the people, or else, because you're going to split apart this holy people, and then the Assyrians or whomever can come and destroy us. And I just heard an interview today with an Israeli journalist who was literally saying the same things. Not that Netanyahu is to blame for the horrible attacks, and we run out of words to give, but I'll settle for attack for the moment. For the horror of Saturday and what has continued, he wasn't blaming Netanyahu, but he was making the parallel and saying, just like the king's advisors, we know them as the prophets, Amos and Isaiah and Jeremiah, just as they were advising the king of Israel that you can't do what you're trying to do and still maintain the Jews as a holy people, just as they couldn't do it then. This journalist was saying today, Netanyahu's advisors and much of the Jewish world, much of Am Yisrael around the world has been saying to Bibi, all of your efforts towards what you call judicial reform, which most people agree, and as you can see, whatever polls you want in Israel, most people agree that Netanyahu keeps on pushing it so that he can stay out of jail. That's the way most Israelis see it. Okay, but all of the advisors are public in saying, they've been saying to him, if you continue along this path, it's going to weaken the Jewish people. And again, I'm not necessarily endorsing this position. I'm explaining just what I heard this morning in an interview. It was in Hebrew. That's why I didn't, I'm not going to play it for you necessarily, but that because of all of those efforts, and this is only one, not even an explanation, but one interpretation, if you will, because of everything that's been done in the last 6-8 months, that has weakened the will of the majority of the Israeli population, including the number of leaders of the military who stopped training, who backed off, who said they won't serve in their, and it's one explanation that many Israelis and many journalists are now positing as a reason for why the Israeli military just was not ready for the horror of Saturday morning. Okay, all right. Just to as we are struggling with it, obviously the Israelis are struggling with it as they bury their dead, as they bury their parents, their children, their spouses, their siblings, their babies. The last number of deaths is in Israel is over 1,300. And I certainly, some of you are aware of this. I have personal connection to people who have been killed, who are still missing. I'm sure some of you do. And in Israel, everyone knows someone else who's been affected, if it wasn't them and their own families personally. So this is a very, very personal, horrible tragedy for them. They use words, and I think we should also, like a pogrom.
Yes.
This was a pogrom, like our ancestors suffered at the hands of the Cossacks.
Yes.
And that our ancestors and our neighbors and even some of us in our community suffered at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators. Go back further in history, if you will. It's inconceivable. It's inconceivable that these kinds of things could be happening. And then multiply the difficulty or the pain, and that the information and the pictures are so graphic, and they're also so available instantaneously to everyone around the world and of whatever age. And how all of this, all of the pictures and the stories and the narratives can be, this is not my plug for gematria, but how they can all be misinterpreted and mistranslated and shared around and put into a different context. All right. The purpose today is to affirm and I think give all of us permission to be angry and to be grieving and to indeed personally even feel threatened. Dan implied, some of you probably know if you're reading local newspapers or watching, that there are threats all over the place. We have to be aware of that. We can't just block it off. That's the world that we are living in. Having said all that, because we are who we are, and I say that intentionally, because we are who and what we are as Jews and as caring people, what is happening to the citizens of Gaza pains us also. It's not a question of is it justified or not. There is no moral equivalency between what the terrorists did in Israel and the innocent victims that may be what's the military phrase? Corollary damage? Collateral damage, especially as I think most of you know, what Hamas does is they place their headquarters in hospitals and in schools and in residential buildings and and whatever. That's always been their pattern. In addition to the fact that, and again, my purpose was to give you some background that you may not know or may not or have not been able to put into context. The government of Hamas, and incidentally, let me put it in this order. Israel has absolutely no desire nor intention to occupy and move back into Gaza and retake Gaza and make it part of that. No, thank you. No, ma'am. No, sir. Okay. They should have given it up back when Samson brought down the thing over the Philistines. There's a connection between Philistines and Palestine, right? That's the same word. Okay. Anyway. So you do learn something new, right? Okay. Philistine, Palestine. more money in universe, not just from the US, more money in aid from outside of the Middle East, meaning I don't include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, whatever, but more money has gone into the coffers of Hamas, the leadership of Gaza, than has been given to the state of Israel in foreign aid. The damning piece of that is that money was not used for infrastructure, for education, for hospitals, whatever it might be. It was used to build tunnels and to buy more munitions and to teach hatred against the Jews, not, you know, and all that. Okay. That does not mean that all residents of Gaza are guilty. That does not mean that all residents of Gaza are supporters of Hamas. However, it does mean, if you weren't aware, that any journalist in Gaza who publishes an editorial or news that the Hamas leaders don't like, that journalist happens to disappear, or his family disappears, or her family disappears. All those who are young people especially, but all those who are protesting and saying, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, that's not what Hamas, it may be, there may be residents of Gaza who would be willing to accept that, but that's not what Hamas wants. Free Palestine is just a code phrase for kill the Jews, take over all of the Holy Land, and then once we get past the Jews, then we're going to move on to the Palestinian Authority, and then we're going to move on to other people whom we don't like. All right. I said I wasn't going to give a lecture, so I'm going to stop there. I'm sure there will be things that I think about and that are going to jump out to me. There were 3 handouts. One is a hang on, you're first. One is a map. Now, granted, it's a map from 1967. Okay, but it does show, and here you got to keep something in mind. All right, if this table is Israel, the size of my cell phone is Gaza. And they're right when they talk about, you know, one of the most densely populated areas on earth. Okay, but that's not Israel's fault. That's because none of the other Arab countries will let any of the residents of Gaza who want to leave. You know, it's not just a blockade from Israel trying to protect itself from terrorists. It's also the Egyptians or any other country won't let these Palestinians come and take citizenship in their country either. So there's that for proportional reasons. So if this table is Israel, size of the cell phone is Gaza, but keep something else in mind. The rest of this room is the rest of the Arab world.
Parking lot.
Okay, no, not necessarily into the parking lot, but maybe close, right? But the rest of the Arab world, which since 1967, and some people would say since 1948, and some people would even say since the year 2000, all those other Arab nations that could have provided safety, democracy, whatever to these quote unquote Palestinians. And some of my closest friends are Palestinians and they're Israeli Jews, but they're Palestinians because they were born in Palestine. Okay. So it's not just the statement of, well, you know, Israel wants to annihilate, destroy all of Gaza. On the contrary, it's the Arab world that doesn't want Gaza to be existing as a separate place. Okay, all right, Michael, please.
Rabbi, thank you very much. I've been watching this just like everybody else on the phone, yes, on TV.
It should pick them up. It should pick them up. Okay, the microphone there so that they can hear you through this. Okay.
Can you hear me? No. Oh, they can't hear.
No,
me?
don't move it, don't move it.
Your husband said, "Don't move it."
Correct. Is that better? Anyway, I've been watching all of this unfold, and thank you very much, Rabbi, for doing this. I appreciate it. What I understand, and it makes sense to me, is that there was a breakdown in Israeli intelligence. And this was, according to one speaker that I heard, it spoke very well and it made a lot of common sense that this attack, the Saturday attack, was very well coordinated and it was planned over a long period of time. And it's not that the Israelis, so they said, well, the IDF was not ready, but it was a real surprise because of how well the attack took place. See, and so that's what happened there. Hamas they appointed themselves to be where they are. They don't care about the Palestinians.
No, they were elected. They didn't appoint themselves. They were elected, whether it was a fair election or not, besides the point, but it's an elected government.
Well,
Yeah.
the elections went as far as you can throw a boulder, you know? So that's why I say it was a large part of that. They split themselves in, of course, with the help of some other people. But that was a pretty sad state of affairs. And based on everything you were saying, I want to add just this. And this is a rabbinic question, more or less, or a rabbinic question and a comment. We are now praying to God to come to the aid of Israel. I don't know why really we're doing that. Because why did God allow this to happen in the first place? See, that I waited, I guess, for something like this for 50 years, but I wasn't around. I was born in 1944, so I wasn't really ready, you know. But so this is a very big problem for me to hash out of my own, in my own. So I asked other rabbis over the past couple of days. I have friends rabbis here and in California that I go, and primarily Orthodox. So that's what. So I would love to hear your position on that, and how do I rectify that? And also, now this is very difficult to say, but if looking at everything, is it fair or right or proper to say, is God complicit? I know it's hard to swallow, because if it's about to happen for a second time, you start to wonder what is really happening here. Thank you.
Let me address the first one. That's the more easy. As difficult as it is, it's the easier one to respond to. I had an email conversation. You may have seen. Did you see the panel? It was either yesterday morning or the day before, that a number of Israeli parents, or actually American Israeli parents, were at a panel at a table at the Carlton Hotel in Tel Aviv. They were telling their stories of either how they were saved or their kids are missing or whatever. Okay. So the last, as you're looking at it, the last fella to the left, is that stage right? Yeah. Okay. So Okay, as you're watching it on television, all right, is Professor Jonathan Dekelchen. I can't call him a friend, he's an acquaintance. And we taught together at summer camp, probably 15 years ago. He's a professor of history at Hebrew University, but in Jerusalem, but lives on one of the kibbutzim that was attacked. His family is okay, they were in a safe room, but his son was outside because he's in the army and was wearing his uniform and was immediately captured. And they're assuming that he's in Gaza. The son's 35, twin daughters, and another on the way. But Jonathan was saying, and this goes to Michael, to the first comment, that yes, there was failure of intelligence, probably United States as well as Israel. Okay. He was calling it a perfect storm of one condition, another condition, another condition, another condition. And when I started out talking about, to make the connection to the Sinat Chinam and the situation between the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Jewish community back 2,000 years ago, as opposed to the ultra-Orthodox and the secular in Israel today, and things like that. And with the case, as this one journalist was saying, that the whole country has been weakened and was not, was divided, not didn't feel totally unified, and members, including leaders, top leaders of the military, were questioning their allegiance, and they admit that they just weren't ready. Then there was this music festival that was announced only about a week before, that, hey, we're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of young people, celebrating the Jewish festival on the beach, only 3 miles away from the Gaza Strip, and a number of other incidents that all came together and made that particular date a good. Yes, it was planned. It was planned a long time in advance, probably with help. I would think, and I would surmise that with help from Iran and others, but I'm not an expert with that. But Jonathan was saying that the whole thing is, we can't just blame the army, we can't just blame the intelligence, we can't just blame Netanyahu, we can't just blame The only ones to blame are Hamas, and we got to focus on that. Okay. To your second question, and Michael, probably in one way or another, every single one of us in this room and those on Zoom and everyone in the community, not only this week, but since the Holocaust, and maybe even going back before that, have been asking that question. The literature is filled with not answers. I don't have any. I'm not God, and I don't understand God, and I certainly don't try to speak for God. My response only is that, to the extent that God can help me deal, cope, and respond. Not was God responsible for. There are all kinds of stories that if God created human beings to be good, by definition there has to be evil, because you can't have something to be defined as good if there's not something that's not good. So part of it is, and this is a little bit of a rabbinic cop-out, but it's not a Rabbi Roman cop-out. It's a rabbinic cop-out from several generations ago, is that by definition, not being God, we can't understand God.
I can't wrestle with you, I mean with God, but I can wrestle with you.
And you can wrestle with God.
Well-
It just, sometimes the answer is no.
I'm not getting any answer, but I can get an answer from you, and you're not.
Well, I don't know if you're getting an answer from me, but you get a response, and we can continue to wrestle together. And we continue to argue to get together. That's Israel. That's where the word comes from, is wrestling with God. Whether it was in Jacob in the story as it is in the Torah, we'll get there in a couple of weeks, whether it's in that story, or whether it's in the struggles that we have right now, is where's the good? Why is there such evil in the world? And is that, ultimately, is it God's fault? Well, if God created us, I guess you could say it's God's fault. And there's lots of literature that said God admits that it's I don't mean to laugh at it, but there's a beautiful Hasidic story. I forget which of the 7,000 Hasidic rabbis attributed it to, but okay, so one of the rabbis yells at God and says, "How could you let this happen? There's pain, there's this, how could you let it happen?" And God says, "You're right, I blew it. Okay, I'm responsible, I blew it. New? Now what? Okay, what are you gonna do about it? Okay, don't wait for me to change it," God says. You go out and do something about it. That's kind of the Jewish responses I know.
Why the Jews?
That's our fate. We're how out of God to choose the Jews, right? Okay, Dennis, please.
So the Palestinians, they elected Hamas as their government.
The Palestinians in Gaza, the residents of Gaza.
Elected the Hamas as
Yeah,
their
yes.
leader. Hamas was funded by Iran and all those other
Hamas at that time certainly was just one of the factions of the larger Palestinian, the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. Hamas, Fatah, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, they were all under the one umbrella.
So Hamas provided the Palestinians with infrastructure.
No,
No?
What do you mean by infrastructure?
Well, buildings and.
No.
food.
No. Actually, Israel was there. God, I mean, from Egypt was there. Gaza was part of the Sinai and part of allied with Egypt, and then after 1967, then Israel. I hesitate to use the word conquer, but Israel won with part of the ceasefire was that Israel would get the territory of Gaza and built a lot of that area. There were hundreds of thousands of Jewish Israelis.
So what would cause the Palestinians to elect Hamas as their leading government?
Well, not being facetious, but guns to their heads.
Guns to their heads.
Yeah,
So-
and bribery, and
They have these hostages now.
now they have the hostage.
So would the Palestinians turn on Hamas and locate these hostages?
I wish, I wish that were a viable scenario.
Or
I don't know anyone,
or intelligence to Israel or United States,
well,
because they're going through, what's happening there.
the US, I mean, Blinken, even as of, what was he there this morning? Yes, Blinken as of this morning is pledging, total cooperation of the US intelligence and hostage experts to work with the Israelis on that. But it's not the average Palestinians. And yes, there are those Palestinian residents of Gaza who I I have the name in my files because I gave a sermon about him, but, you know, of somebody who he's a poet, he's a doctor and whatever, you know, he used to come back and forth across the border to do cancer surgery at the hospitals in Israel and whatever. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian citizens, residents who would prefer to be able to live in peace with Israel. But they got guns to their heads. And I don't mean the Israeli guns. But the longer that Israeli, call it what you will, retaliation or the Israeli bombing or incursion, whatever, the longer that that's going to go on, the more that they're going to be affected. And they're going to build up their resentment, you know, the same way that we're feeling. So as I said to somebody the other day, it is not it's a lose-lose situation right now. Now something may change, and who knows? And you know, a Moses could come along and lead us out of this plague into some other kind of resolution. I don't think it's anybody that in a recognizable form right now, but could happen. Sue, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say something that connected to something you said about the.
Can you speak a little louder?
I was just going to say something that sort of relates to what you said about the rabbinic thought on why Jews are always victims and so on. I was doing some research a long time ago on the Holocaust, and I came across, I don't think this is attributed to a rabbi, it's the sages who made a statement that once an evil spirit is allowed to rampage, it does not distinguish between the righteous and the unjust. And in effect, it's saying, God didn't make these people make the decision to rampage.
Right.
They made the decision. God did supposedly endow us with choice. That's it.
That's theme that we observed and celebrated.
Yes.
On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that we make choices, and that if we make the wrong choice, we can be forgiven. We can atone. We can get, you know, seek repentance and change our behavior, and move on. But yes, I'm gonna John and Ricky. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's anybody on the Zoom that was raising a hand or not. Somebody cue me in if you see a. You see a hand. I'm in the middle. That's me. That's me at the top, but I didn't know about anybody else. Okay, all right. What I say, John and Ricky.
I became aware of and started paying attention in 1973. And in my recollection, in the entire 50 years, is that the Palestinian people have been basically victims of the rest of the Saudi world. And that my observation is that I don't think anyone really cares about them in the Saudi world. They're being used as a tool to create the excuse to fulfill what apparently seems to be a central tenet of radical Islam, and that's the destruction of Israel. And
Well, it's
okay.
Let me
Like this plan's been sitting on the shelf, waiting for the moment of weakness, apparent weakness in the border, to launch this. Here it comes, but they force a situation of possible genocide by cutting off water to Gaza, etc. And it creates a pretense for the larger powers to come in, and none of it has ever been about, from the Saudi, ever been about uplifting the Palestinians.
Well, whether it's the Saudis or whether it's
Or whoever.
right, and any of the others, and as we said, that Amy.
Amy.
Okay, all right. As we said, okay. before 73, there were lots of opportunities and reach out for the ongoing response from the Arab world has been no, 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 no. Every time that Israel has said, you're willing to do this for peace. All we're asking is for you to say, we don't want more territory than just the size of this. We're fine with this. Yeah, you keep all the rest of the room. You go ahead and pay for the air conditioning. Okay, all right. But it's always no. And like you said, yes, the Palestinians have always been the pawns.
Yes.
And a very small number have been allowed to advance themselves, come to the United States or go anywhere else, go to London,
Right.
and do that. Again, quoting this one interview that I was listening to this morning, is that people aren't coming out and saying that, okay, we understand that Hamas, their stated goal is to kill all the Jews. But the underlying recognition is that they're willing to have all of the Gazan citizens die as well.
Yes.
Okay,
That's what I'm saying.
and they're not denying that.
Right.
They're just saying, well, if that's what it means to get rid of all, and not just the Jews, incidentally, because after the Jews, they're going to come for the Christians.
Yeah.
Okay, all the infidels, and maybe the Sunnis will come for the Shiites, and but we're just
Exactly.
remember your line from the minister of the Holocaust. First they came for the work, and then eventually, by the time they came for me, there was no one left to stand up to me. Okay, so that's part of that history also. Ricky, then Amy.
Oh, we got Amy. Amy's been on for a while.
But Ricky had her hand up first. So, okay, go ahead. Then Amy.
And I'm not.
Okay,
I was going to say this, as an analogy,
loud.
go back to, easier, an analogy, to go back to part of the discussion that Michael brought up. Is, how could God let this happen? But an analogy I take.
Excuse me, there's a difference between how could God let it happen and how could God cause it,
Okay.
right?
You want to
Okay,
look at
yeah.
It could be, what I'm gonna say is gonna be affected by both. Taking it to a very small, say, a personal level. We all have horrible experience at some level to ourselves. Single person, that those experiences in the end, who knows how long later, have made us so much stronger, so much whatever, so much of who we are is because of them. But we went to, and so that's how I feel with that. Experience of, we get better, if you survive it, now we have the choice of how we handle it. And we can go back.
Our strength, right.
Right. Chronicle, exhibit, those that survived, and the ones that had a purpose or had something, meaning. And so, I don't know God's timetable of when we come out of this horrible. Before it came out of it, I don't know if we ever came out of it 2,000 years ago. We may still be in the process of whatever is the horror to get to whatever will be the strength and courage, etc., that we will show.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Amy, you're on.
Years ago, I had 50 Arab students in classes. And it was during the time of Saddam Hussein and all of that issue. And I asked the Saudis and I asked the Emiratis why the other Arab nations were not interceding. And they all had the same answer. It's not our problem, number one. Number two, they're our brothers. We are not going to interfere with their business. And I think that may answer, that mindset might answer some of the questions we have of why others are not interceding on behalf of Israel or Gaza. It's a mindset of a brotherhood. It's the mindset of we don't interfere with other people's problems.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's something else that needs to be said. I'm not endorsing the statement, but it's a truism. And that is that in the minds of much of the Arab world, certainly the governments and the leadership of the Arab world, the Palestinians are lower class. Okay, they're lower class. And again, not to bring this kind of politics into it at all, but we see a little bit of it happening, more than a little bit. We see some of it happening in our own world, in our own society, is the threat of, well, if too many of those immigrants, if too many of those underclass, illiterate, impoverished people come across our borders, come into our country, what's it going to do to us and the affluence and the success that we've been able to accomplish? And there is, if you look at the history of the Arab world, there's some of that, as well. Okay. Yeah, please.
In reference to that comment, I also heard a comment that, there's a gate from Egypt. And the question was, why doesn't Egypt, allow the passage through? And that comment was made, was that they didn't care that it was Israel's problem and Gaza was Israel's problem.
Right, and Israelis are saying, well, it's just as much Egypt's problem because we have cooperation on how we're responsible. But the average Egyptian citizen walking the streets and going to cafes and supermarkets and outdoor markets and whatever, they don't want these guys coming in, suicide bombers coming into their lives either.
They don't want the disruption of their lives.
Right, exactly. Once again, I want to do one thing. We don't have to end yet, but I before I forget, a number of people have been texting me, sending emails, calling the office, whatever it is. If you are so moved to make some kind of a financial contribution, okay? There are any number of sources, and I can't say that one is better than another. If you do your own research if you have a pet project or an organization that you normally support, whatever. I do know, however, the following. Both the emergency fund that the Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona, what used to be the Federation, it's now Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. If you go to their website today, they have a matching funds program. Whatever is pledged, someone is matching that up to $180,000 just for the day. So that's one. And Jewish National Fund. Some people have issues with JNF, but Jewish National Fund, which is where we always used to put coins in the little push gate, right? Jewish National Fund, I think through this weekend has a $1 million matching funds donation. So, and if you're looking for other sources, I don't know, Michael, do you have a suggestion also?
Well,
Was that it?
I want to say something.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, but no, so, and if you're looking for other, if you're looking for other organizations to make some contributions, I'll get to you in a second, to make some contributions that, consider those two, but any of them, any relief organization, read the American, Israeli, Magen David Adom, which is the Israeli Red Cross, obviously, Hatzalah, which is, blood bank and emergency and rescue services, anything like supporting the IDF, anything that you do, that's great. But I do know of those two matching funds programs that are available right now. The other thing, take this for what it's worth. Okay, if you have friends or relatives with whom you are in contact in Israel, certainly, in addition to just sending messages, emails, phone calls, texts, whatever, we're thinking of you, we hope everybody's okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What a lot of them are doing, I've heard this from 3 different people, what a lot of them are doing are asking that if you are so inclined to order, it could be a couple pairs of underwear. It could be clothes, it could be anything, little toys for children, whatever. If you order them through Amazon, I guess there's a certain dollar limit that and especially Amazon, I guess Amazon Prime had it was a
Yes.
Prime Days or whatever, okay? And find out from your friend because they're in Israel, in all the major cities, they've set up distribution banks for people to donate things for these families that had to leave their kibbutzim and their homes with nothing on their backs, and they can't get back into their homes. So they need underwear. They need socks. The children need toys, whatever it might be. So if you do have connections with someone that you're in touch with, is write them and say, if I arrange to send through Amazon or whatever, a couple pairs of socks, can you get them to one of these distribution centers and whatever? They don't want to, the Israelis right now, they're very, very hesitant to use social media. They are very hesitant to put names and addresses, phone numbers and whatever on Facebook, TikTok, whatever it might be. But if you already have a connection with someone, and especially if you know their address and are willing to do that, some of my former students who live in Israel are doing that. They're taking up collections, especially for little children and whatever. So, or if you want more information about that, just check with me. Yes, Mike.
To address some of the things you just said about sending money to organizations, George Soros is behind 1 or 2 that have made it look like it's going to Israel.
It's not.
But you have to be very, very careful about that. I
Be
got some
very
information.
careful with any of them.
Yes.
With any of
But I'm
them.
talking
Right.
specifically George Soros. Also, I want to address something about the Palestinian territory and the press, the news press. Most Jews are aware of Hamas attacking from hospital rooms, the top of a schoolyards, and of course they do that is because in Israel, there's a law you cannot, you have to use a surgical situation to strike, where Hamas just is very random. So it's very, very difficult for the idea to get any victory. And there's a lot of lives lost because of that.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that people are not aware of some, is that in the Palestinian territory, the West Bank, the Hamas transports their bomb-making material, weapons, ammunition,
Yeah.
and ambulances.
Mhm.
You see, and so there is a law in Israel, you cannot fire, they cannot fire on an ambulance before they don't know if there's a human being in there
Right.
or a terrorist. So they're really in a very, very difficult position, when it comes to these situations.
Hamas, incidentally, Hamas, just to put it into context, Hamas is not the ruling authority in the West Bank.
No.
Right.
In Gaza, yes, but the Palestinian Authority that's the Fatah, that's Abbas's group, is in West Bank, Judea and Samaria, for people that like that, or the occupied territories, whichever term you want to use. But Hamas is they're very frustrated that, with the exception of Hezbollah in the north, and I've been under rocket fire from Hezbollah, so that's a real threat. But with the exception of Hezbollah in the north, the rest of the Arab world, for whatever reason, is not jumping up and saying, "Yay, Hamas, good," da 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 da, and that makes them all the more frustrated and all the more resentful. Whatever. Yeah,
I believe, I'm not sure if this is correct, but I believe Hamas translates into violence.
Back to my gematria thing. Thank you. Okay, now, not necessarily with numbers, but the Arabic Hamas, the title of the group, is actually an acronym.
Well,
It's
here's
three
another-
Arabic. It's three Arabic words that like the mobilization front or something like that. But the Hebrew word Hamas is evil. Again, it's next week's Torah portion, but the word appears in the story. That's why God told Noah to build an ark, because the world was filled with Hamas.
Well, there's another one for you. I won't eat hummus.
You want to But you're asking for the wrong thing. It's hummus. It's hummus.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I don't know anybody.
You have to get really into it. Really.
Bonnie, hold it. Bonnie. Bonnie.
Encourage every able-bodied Jew to be there and show their support for Israel, because we have to have more people than they have. They have to be more voting.
But when is that? Because
Don't know.
we heard Dan heard that there's something else going on, so.
There was gonna be a total Palestinian, tomorrow, which is the Jihad Day for the Palestinians across the United States. However, the University of Arizona's administration put out a strong condemnation, like that type of thing. And apparently, last we heard, about an hour before I got here, about 2 o'clock, it was canceled. So the pro-Palestinian, at the U of A, has.
Okay, we'll watch for more information.
Yeah, it could change. It could absolutely. change.
Right, okay, okay, no.
I don't know anybody in Israel, but I would feel really, really good if I could reach out like you're suggesting. I mean, you've got people you know, they're students, et cetera.
Right.
And I would be happy to do something along the same lines, but I don't know anybody who could then.
I will find out how large of a project they want it to be. They may only want it to be, from 2 or 3 people, not overwhelmed. They have small mailboxes.
Sure.
Jeanette, please.
Yes.
The name of two organizations you mentioned that you can see the name of.
Matching funds.
Yeah.
Jewish National Fund is one of them,
Yeah.
and the local is Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. Used to be the Federation. Yeah, Donna, did you?
Yeah, the Jewish Federation of Portland, Oregon has a matching $500,000.
That was very kind of you to offer that.
Yeah, that's a stern thing.
I think most of the major metropolitan communities have, have done that as a kind of thing. And I remember back from 73 and that's what happened. Those that can, make that kind of incentive matching grant right away and do it.
May I add one thing?
Please.
Contact your state representatives. Ask them to please have Arizona's proclamation, supporting Israel. So far, the only states that have done that are Texas and North Carolina. Your representatives, if you live in Green Valley, or Gail Griffin, Lupe Lopez, and your state senator is David Gowan. If you need the information for their email addresses, I have it, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do. And if there is there a text available? Is there a sample text available? Proclamation?
I had written the day before I got them.
Okay.
There is something available.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Lupe would do it, but okay, all right. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. I will, again, a reminder and an invitation. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock is the service. And then that'll probably run till 11:15, 11:20. And then there's a little kiddish, we can sit down around tables and conversations, but some extra prayers and thoughts and maybe a few songs for peace as well. If you would indulge me, there are many things going around, and I have some that I'll hand out also on Saturday. Prayers, poems, etc. that try to express our feelings. If you've got this one, it says Leon Scher, but thank you. Leon is the musician, he's a cantor, an old dear friend of mine. Some of you know, Laura's gonna smile. Some of you know the Heal Us Now healing prayer that we do on Yom Kippur. Leon composed that. He put this poem that Rabbi Alvin Solovey wrote, and Leon put it to music. I don't have the music, but he's the one who published it, so that's why it says Leon Scher, but the poet is actually Alvin Solovey. So follow along with me if you want to read out loud. I invite you. We prayed for rain. Don't forget, this was Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, the day that traditionally Jews pray for rain. We pray for rain and we got tears. Yes, we said the ancient words, Mashib Haruach, Morit Hakasha, acknowledging God as the one who makes the rain fall and the wind blow. But we got tears flowing like rain that would not relent. Tears for the dead, tears for the wounded, tears for the kidnapped, and tears for the captive. Tears for the soldiers, tears for the reservists, tears for our sons, tears for our daughters, tears for our friends, and tears for our families. Tears for our nation, tears for our people. So many tears, so many tears. God who makes the rain fall, God who makes tears on earth. Send us your tears from heaven, but only if you send them as blessings. Only if you send them as signs that you will be with us as we defend our nation, that you will be with us as we fight to end the terror that dwells in our nation.